Imagine the scene across America today as the digital displays at local gas stations flicker to a welcoming $3.20 per gallon. For millions of hardworking families who have been suffocating under the weight of high energy costs, this sudden relief feels like a long-awaited breath of fresh air after a long period of intense financial pressure. You might find yourself smiling at the pump, perhaps feeling a sense of victory as you watch the total cost stay significantly lower than it was last year, leading to an immediate dopamine hit that whispers everything is going to be okay now. However, this sense of relief is exactly where the financial danger begins to manifest because of a psychological phenomenon known as mental accounting, which tricks our brains into seeing this saved money as free capital. Most people will instinctively take that $20 or $30 they saved on a full tank and immediately spend it on a premium coffee or an extra meal at a fast food drive-thru without a single second thought. This is the ultimate illusion of the middle class because while you think you are finally getting ahead of the curve, you are actually just recycling your potential wealth back into the hands of large corporations. Why is it that a small drop in the price of a commodity can make us feel so wealthy while we ignore the massive systemic leaks in our overall financial bucket? We are currently standing at a psychological crossroads where your next decision will determine if this price drop is a genuine turning point for your net worth or just another temporary distraction that keeps you running on the treadmill of mediocrity. Today, we are going to strip away the emotional comfort of cheap fuel to reveal the cold, hard mathematical truth about who is actually profiting from your newfound savings and how you can reclaim that power for yourself. The sudden decrease in fuel costs to $3.20 per gallon triggers a powerful neurochemical reaction within the human brain that most consumers are completely unaware of during their daily commute. When you pull up to the pump and see a price significantly lower than the previous month, your brain releases a surge of dopamine because it perceives this change as an unexpected survival reward. This evolutionary mechanism was originally designed to help our ancestors identify abundant food sources, but in the modern world, it translates into a dangerous feeling of financial safety that encourages impulsive decision-making. We do not see the price of gasoline in a vacuum. Instead, we view it through the lens of emotional relief, which temporarily blinds us to our long-term financial goals and existing debts. What is truly controlling your wallet in this moment is a cognitive trap known as the anchoring effect, which is frequently studied by behavioral economists at major American institutions. For months, your mind was anchored to the painful memory of paying $4 or even $5 per gallon, making the current price of $3.20 seem like an incredible bargain. This psychological contrast creates a false sense of surplus, wealth, leading many people to believe they have more disposable income than they actually do in their total financial picture. You feel richer not because your income has increased or your debt has vanished, but simply because one specific and highly visible expense has returned to a more manageable level for the time being. This phenomenon is further complicated by the concept of mental accounting, where we categorize money based on its source or intended use rather than its objective value. When the U.S. Energy Information Administration reports a drop in energy prices, most households treat the savings as bonus money that belongs in a different mental bucket than their hard-earned salary. Because this money feels like a gift from the market, we are psychologically predisposed to spend it on immediate gratification rather than applying it to high-interest credit card debt or a Vanguard retirement account. This is the exact moment when the average consumer loses their strategic advantage because they allow a temporary market fluctuation to dictate a permanent increase in their lifestyle spending. Retailers and corporations are well aware of this behavioral pattern, and they often position their marketing strategies to capture this newly released cash flow from American households. When people save money at the pump, they are statistically more likely to visit shopping malls or order more expensive items at restaurants because the perceived financial pressure has been lifted. This is not a personal failure of willpower, but rather a systemic hole in the way our brains process economic data in a consumer-driven society. To break free from this cycle, you must recognize that the $20 saved per week is not a license to indulge, but is instead a critical piece of capital that needs to be deployed with surgical precision. By understanding that your excitement at the gas station is a biological response rather than a logical financial assessment, you can begin to regain control over your economic destiny. The real root cause of your financial stagnation is not the fluctuating price of oil, but the lack of a disciplined system to capture these small wins and turn them into significant assets. We must stop being passive observers of market trends and start becoming active managers of every single cent that flows through our lives, regardless of how small it may seem. Once you strip away the dopamine and the anchoring bias, you are left with a simple choice. Will you spend this temporary surplus on fleeting comfort, or will you use it to build a foundation of lasting freedom? What is the core mathematical formula that will fundamentally shift your financial trajectory from a state of survival to a position of true power? To understand this, we must look beyond the simple numbers displayed on the gas station sign and focus on the concept of the velocity of capital. When the price of gasoline drops by more than $1 per gallon, as reported by the United States Energy Information Administration, it represents a significant structural change in your monthly cash flow that most people treat as a mere rounding error. However, for those who understand the mechanics of wealth, this price decrease is not just a saving but a hidden dividend that can be weaponized to build a massive fortune over time if redirected with absolute discipline. Let us look at the empirical data provided by the United States Department of Transportation, which suggests that the average American driver covers approximately 13,500 miles every single year. If we assume a standard, there's a B. When the price drops from a previous high of $4.50 down to the current level of $3.20, you are looking at a direct annual saving of $702 per vehicle. While $60 a month might seem like a trivial amount that is easily lost to minor expenses, its mathematical potential when placed inside a compound interest engine is nothing short of revolutionary for your net worth. If you were to take that $60 in monthly gas savings and consistently automate it into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund through a provider like Vanguard or Fidelity, you would be tapping into the greatest force in the financial universe. Historically, the American stock market has delivered an average annual return of approximately 10% over long periods of time, which means your gas savings are not just paper cash but high potential seeds for a future harvest. Over a period of 30 years, that small and seemingly insignificant monthly contribution could grow into a staggering sum of nearly $130,000 just from the difference in the price of fuel. This is the mechanical reality of wealth building, where the quiet discipline of capturing small efficiencies leads to a level of freedom that most people only dream of achieving. Beyond the individual level, the mechanics of this price drop create a powerful ripple effect throughout the entire American economy as the cost of transporting goods like groceries and electronics begins to decrease for major national retailers. Companies within the transportation and retail sectors often see their operational margins expand when energy costs cool down, which often leads to a stabilized or even reduced consumer price index in the subsequent fiscal quarters. By recognizing this trend, a savvy investor can align their personal financial strategy with these macroeconomic shifts to ensure they are the ones profiting from the increased efficiency of the global supply chain. The real question then becomes why the vast majority of the population chooses to consume this efficiency immediately through lifestyle inflation rather than investing it to buy back their future time and labor. As we analyze these cold and objective numbers, it becomes clear that the real game of wealth is not about how much you earn, but how much of your surplus you can successfully capture and put to work. The difference between a lifetime of labor and a life of total leisure often comes down to these small mechanical adjustments in how we handle the surplus generated by a volatile and ever-changing market. If you can master the math of the gas pump, you can master the math of any financial asset class because the principles of compound growth and systemic discipline are universal across all modern markets. But as we move forward into the next phase of our journey, we must ask ourselves what internal shifts must happen within our own minds to actually execute this plan when the world is constantly tempting us to spend every cent we save. What is the true difference in the mindset of wealth between someone struggling to make ends meet and a person building an enduring financial legacy? Most individuals view a sudden drop in the cost of living as a green light to increase their consumption habits because they define wealth primarily by their ability to purchase visible goods and experiences in the present moment. This is a profound psychological error that keeps the vast majority of the American population locked in a perpetual cycle of financial dependency on their next paycheck, regardless of how much their income might rise. A truly strategic thinker understands that real wealth is not the accumulation of material things, but the accumulation of options and the absolute ownership of one's own time and energy. When you see $3.20 at the pump, the scarcity mindset immediately asks, what else can I buy today? While the wealth mindset asks, how much more freedom can I purchase for my future self? Shifting your perspective requires a fundamental and courageous rejection of the consumerist conditioning that has been deeply embedded in the American psyche for decades through sophisticated advertising and constant social pressure. We have been systematically trained to believe that we deserve a reward for every small financial victory, such as a decrease in energy prices or a modest tax refund from the Internal Revenue Service. This emotional need for immediate gratification is the primary invisible obstacle standing between you and the type of generational wealth managed by massive institutional firms like BlackRock or State Street. To move beyond this common trap, you must begin to view every single dollar as a productive employee that should be working around the clock to generate more value rather than being retired early through mindless and impulsive spending. The difference between those who struggle and those who thrive lies in their sophisticated understanding of opportunity cost and the long-term impact of small daily choices on their overall financial trajectory. While it may seem insignificant to spend an extra $5 or $10 on a premium snack just because your gas bill was lower this week, that small amount represents a lost opportunity to participate in the growth of the global economy. Over a 30-year investment horizon, that single $5 bill compounded at the historical rate of the American stock market could have grown into a much more substantial sum that provides real security during your retirement years. By choosing to spend that surplus today, you are effectively stealing from your future self and significantly delaying the day you can finally walk away from a job you no longer find fulfilling or necessary. A strategic mindset also recognizes that economic downturns and fluctuations are not tragedies to be feared, but are actually the most fertile ground for building significant and lasting financial advantages. When the average person is fearful or distracted by short-term market volatility and rising costs, the disciplined investor is calmly executing a plan that relies on the mathematical certainty of market cycles and rational human behavior. This approach requires a level of emotional maturity that allows you to ignore the loud and distracting noise of the daily headlines and focus instead on the underlying mechanics of wealth creation as defined by legendary figures like Warren Buffett or John Bogle. You must learn to fall in love with the process of building a resilient financial fortress rather than the fleeting and temporary high of a new purchase that begins to lose its value the moment you take it home. Ultimately, the shift from a consumer mindset to an owner mindset is the most important and valuable investment you will ever make in your life because it changes the very foundation of how you interact with the world around you. You stop being a passive victim of external circumstances like oil prices or inflation and start becoming the intentional architect of your own economic reality by making every decision based on logic and long-term vision rather than temporary and unreliable feelings. This transformation is not about extreme deprivation or living a life of scarcity, but about prioritizing the profound and lasting peace of mind that comes from knowing you are financially indestructible regardless of global markets. As we transition from these philosophical concepts into the concrete and practical steps you must take today, remember that your mind is the most powerful financial tool in your possession, and how you choose to use it will determine your entire future. The final barrier to achieving this profound shift is the powerful social gravity of those around you, who will likely continue to follow the traditional and destructive path of spending every single increase in their disposable income. Breaking away from the crowd is often uncomfortable and isolating because it requires you to act in a way that seems completely irrational to those who are still trapped in the endless treadmill of modern consumption. However, the reward for this courage is a level of autonomy and security that is completely foreign to the average person who remains at the mercy of the next economic shift or political decision made in Washington. By embracing this new perspective, you are not just saving a few dollars on gasoline, but you are actively and deliberately redefining what it means to live a successful and meaningful life in the 21st century. Now that you have successfully deconstructed the psychological illusions and the mathematical potential of your fuel savings, you must transition from theoretical knowledge to decisive and surgical action before your old habits reclaim your newly discovered capital. Knowledge without immediate application is merely a form of sophisticated entertainment, and in the world of high-stakes personal finance, the window for capturing market efficiencies is often very narrow before lifestyle inflation absorbs your surplus. You must commit to a series of strategic maneuvers that will lock in your current gains and ensure that every dollar saved at the pump today is working to build your financial fortress for the next several decades. These steps are designed to be simple yet incredibly powerful because they remove human emotion and the need for constant willpower from the equation of wealth building. The first and most critical action you must take is the implementation of what I call the gas differential transfer, which involves a literal and digital separation of your savings from your daily spending habits. You should calculate the exact difference between the previous peak price of $4.50 per gallon and the current price of $3.20 provided by the Energy Information Administration today. For every full tank of gasoline you purchase, you must immediately and manually transfer that specific dollar amount from your primary checking account into a dedicated brokerage account or a high-yield savings vehicle. By doing this immediately after you leave the gas station, you are training your brain to recognize that this money is not disposable income, but is instead a strategic asset that has been earmarked for long-term growth and security. Secondly, you should adopt a position of tactical sector awareness by observing how these lower energy costs are positively impacting specific segments of the American stock market, such as the transportation and retail industries. Many large-scale logistics companies and national retail chains see an immediate expansion in their operating margins when the cost of diesel and gasoline decreases, which often leads to superior performance for their shareholders over the following fiscal quarters. Use this period of lower fuel costs to research low-cost index funds or specific exchange-traded funds that have heavy exposure to these energy-sensitive sectors to diversify your investment portfolio beyond simple cash savings. This approach allows you to profit twice from the same economic event, once by saving money on your personal fuel consumption, and a second time by capturing the increased profitability of the American corporate landscape. The final and perhaps most important step is to implement a total budget lockdown on your transportation category to ensure that your lower expenses do not lead to higher spending in other non-essential areas of your life. You must maintain your mental and digital budget for gasoline at the higher $4.50 level and treat the current lower price as a temporary market gift that could vanish at any moment without any prior warning. This disciplined approach prevents the dangerous creep of lifestyle inflation and ensures that your cost of living does not rise simply because a single commodity has become more affordable for the time being. As we move into the final phase of our journey, we must prepare ourselves for the inevitable traps that will try to pull you back into your old ways and erase all the progress you have made today. The greatest danger you face right now is not a sudden spike in oil prices, but the invisible and seductive trap of lifestyle inflation that often follows every minor economic victory. If you allow your monthly spending to expand into the gap left by cheaper gasoline, you are effectively setting a sugar-coated mousetrap for your future self that will snap shut the moment the global energy market becomes volatile again. When prices inevitably climb back toward $4 or more, those who failed to capture their savings today will find themselves in a deep financial deficit because they have already habituated their brains to a more expensive way of living that they can no longer easily sustain or retract without significant emotional pain. This is the gravity of debt and the gravity of habit that keeps the majority of the population anchored to a state of perpetual financial vulnerability regardless of their income level. Recall the image of the driver we discussed at the very beginning of this journey who was smiling at the digital display of $3.20 with a sense of false security and temporary relief. You now have the unique opportunity to be a completely different kind of person who sees that same number not as a reason to celebrate a minor consumption win, but as a strategic opening to build an unshakable wall of financial protection for your family. Instead of being the helpless victim of the next global headline or the next interest rate decision made by the Federal Reserve, you can choose to be the master of your own internal economy by maintaining the same level of rigorous discipline, regardless of whether the market is offering you a discount or a new challenge today. The person you were at the start of this video looked at a gas pump and saw a bill, but the person you are now looks at that same pump and sees a powerful opportunity for capital accumulation and strategic growth. Your ultimate goal is to reach a level of wealth where the fluctuations of the outside world have absolutely no power over your peace of mind or your long-term security. Stop letting the price of a gallon of fuel dictate your daily mood and start letting your strategic investments dictate your future, because the only true freedom is the ownership of your time and the total elimination of financial anxiety from your life. As you drive away from the pump today, remember that every cent you save and invest is a brick in the foundation of your legacy, and the only person who can truly prevent your success is the one looking back at you in the rearview mirror every morning. The era of cheap energy is a gift of time and capital that should be used to buy your independence from the system that benefits from your consumption and your debt. Those who ignore the mechanics of wealth will remain on the treadmill of mediocrity